aspects and how you got to feed that funnel. But look, what is brand? Because a lot of people think that it's a nice to have, and that, performance, as we said earlier, that's what you want, short-term performance. Of course you want some short-term performance, but you want brand performance as well. You want long-term performance. And I like to put it as, brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And it is really, really important that as a growing brand, as a startup moving to a scale up, that people are saying the right things about you and that they're interacting even when you're not there to capture them.
Yeah.
So I think
I'm Diana Florescu, and this is the Media Capital Show. In this episode, I sat down with Callum Taylor, head of ITV AdVentures Ignite, ITV's startup incubator supporting young brands to start the journey into TV. We talked about the changes impacting the media industry and how digital startups can turn challenges into opportunities, why TV still matters, and why founders should diversify their marketing mix and think about brand building, especially in times of economic downturn. Callum guided us through some fantastic graphics and insights, so I strongly encourage you to watch the video version of this episode available on our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening. Hi, Callum. It's so great to have you on the show, and I'm glad that we have the chance to finally sit down and talk about ITV AdVentures Ignite and your role with ITV. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, a few months ago, we sat down with Sheena to talk about ITV AdVentures Invest, which I've just learned about the branding name, which I always called ITV AdVentures. And that's an interesting, probably, way to start a podcast as well about the difference between the two. But before we jump into ITV Ignite and how it differs from ITV AdVentures Invest, I'm curious to know how you started your journey in the media industry and also your journey with ITV.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't matter what you link adventures to as long as people know about it, right? So that's the main thing there. So I started in media, knocking on sort of 18 years ago now. At the time, it was solely what we call linear broadcast media. So video on demand and streaming and all the fun we can have with that now. It wasn't really a thing. It was all about linear broadcast. And I started at a place called GMTV, which was the breakfast day part of ITV. So without getting too geeky, ITV or Channel 3 was always lots of different licenses across the UK, and they all merged together in around 2004. A majority of them anyway, with the exclusion of GMTV and STV. So a lot of people at ITV that have been there a while and worked at Channel 3 a while would have come from one of these licenses. And that was where I started my career before sort of working through, experiencing different parts of television advertising, getting more exposure to creative sponsorships, live ads. I remember when they came in. And then we sort of got to the sort of juncture where something new was coming down the track, and startups and these emerging challenger brands were really becoming a thing, and it really sort of sparked my attention. So that kind of led me into this arena, and I spent the past 4 years working solely with startup and scale up businesses. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Interesting. When you joined ITV, did you join specifically for ITV Ignite, or that role sort of evolved as the company also evolved? Because I think ITV AdVentures Invest has been around for a couple of years, but you told me earlier that ITV Ignite, in fact, was a former initiative, right? That led to the new fund.
Yeah, that's it. So no, I sort of came across into what we call main ITV. So as I said, I was working on Channel 3 for many years before. I moved into main ITV to report into somebody called Ben Allen, who's the trading and commercial strategies director for ITV, and he's still my boss at the moment, so oversees everything that we're doing. And it was during that sort of year of transition there where we were integrating the breakfast business and sort of exploring direct response and various different elements of advertising across ITV and how we could improve them, that we started discussing the view of challenger brands and how actually ITV was in a position where, as the biggest commercial broadcaster in the UK, brands got to a size where you would move to a media agency, you would benefit from their buying power, which was a term that we don't really hear luckily so much anymore, but certainly was a thing in the past, and become one of their traded clients. So actually you'd become part of the deal, you'd air on ITV, and it wasn't always the case that clients knew exactly what they were doing on ITV or how that was doing, because they were very much being governed by traded deals. So there wasn't really a sort of view of this emerging market. But obviously, as we know, the startup scene in the UK, was thriving, and ITV needed to look at a way of supporting those businesses. So I was made aware of an initiative that the company was thinking of at the time, which was all actually at the time about digitally native brands, because that was the direction that startups seemed to be going, and everything lived online. That's actually emerged now. We'll sort of get to that what we do now doesn't focus on digital native brands solely. They're still a massive part of what we do. But the reason for that is that obviously supermarkets and various different other players began to support in this arena as well. So suddenly you had, Sainsbury's brands of the future, and D2C brands are getting shelf space. So suddenly the market's changing and you have to move with it. So that's why we now, cater for startups the way we do. And in essence, Ben, who I mentioned earlier, asked me to sort of spearhead this new initiative, which is now Ignite, and take it to market and sort of start, connecting with founders, connecting with angel investors, and understanding this community in a way that ITV perhaps hadn't really, sought to work in the past.
You basically created an entire new category, Callum, from what you're saying, and opening up this opportunity to startups and to even more traditional, so non-digital companies. It just attracts then the interest from other companies in the same sector, perhaps, to advertise on TV, or at least to understand how that space works. I think it would be very interesting to start with maybe that differentiation between ITV Ignite and ITV AdVentures. And I know you prepare some really amazing slides, which I've gone through before, and I recognize some of the points that we're going to raise on today's topic in the report we released last year. So I'm going to put up the slides, and this is also something that we haven't done before. So when we run the shows, we tend to have a very just open conversation, which we're having now. But I think I thought, since you've spent so many years in the industry and you work slightly differently with startups than a usual media for equity fund would do, it would be super helpful to walk some of the founders and people listening in on the aspects, I guess, that they should think of before they start their journey with TV. So I will basically give you the floor, and we can start with, how is ITV Ignite essentially different from ITV AdVentures Invest?
Absolutely, yeah. No, great. Okay, I'll just start sort of taking us through. So yeah, do sort of interrupt as we go and ask questions. It'd be great to make this more discursive. So we spoke a little bit there about AdVentures Ignite and AdVentures Invest. So I'm not going to speak about AdVentures Invest much, because Sheena Amin, who runs Invest, has already done one of these sessions, and today's really focusing on Ignite. But actually, my role does work across the two. So whilst I head up AdVentures Ignite, I'm also responsible for the media pricing of the media side of AdVentures Invest. And also, if partners are working directly with us, my team will look after them as well. But look, the key difference here. So Ignite, I suppose, skipping to the bottom here and working our way up, think of Ignite as your entry point into TV. ITV do not take an equity stake in the business. So that's the key differentiator there. With AdVentures Invest, we know that it's media for equity and it's a minority stake in the business in exchange for that premium inventory on ITV. The partnership sizes are obviously very different as well. So media for equity, we start at £1 million net investment value. With Ignite, there is no minimum, but actually it's all about what is effective. So is it taking whatever money a founder's got and, throwing it up on TV? Absolutely not. It's about working something that is effective to prove TV. Because actually the sort of research that was done when we launched Ignite back in 2019, and at the time it was taken to market as the AdVentures brand. And actually we've grown now, and, hearing people say AdVentures, whether it's Ignite or Invest, is just absolutely amazing to hear how the brand has grown and gained its own awareness. But there were sort of things that came out, barriers that came out that Ignite is existing to tackle. And that was when we researched with Founders Intelligence at the time, things that were coming out, reasons why these new brands were not thinking of TV straight away was, well, because it's going to cost me £1 million and you have to advertise nationally, which, you don't. I don't know where to start with it. So therefore, I don't want to go near it. I don't know how to plan it. But that's sort of why my role exists and my team exists.
Yeah.
Also measurement, you can't measure TV, can you? It's not tangible. So that just scares me. I don't want to get involved with it. So they were the barriers that we sort of set to overcome. And at the end, I'll just talk through Ignite and exactly how we break them down. You can see there that one of the key things is that to start you off, partners can receive matched funding. So we'll, what we call shared risk, right? A lot of people think that shared risk is paying us on sales. Actually, true shared risk is going halves, right? So that's what we do with partners to help. But it's the support element that's the bit that we really can't get across from the off. But again, I've got some quotes later on to show that support at every single step of the journey and making things as easy as possible is why partners are sticking with us now. We're really starting to see some startups become scale-ups.
So essentially, ITV Ignite would be kind of the first or the go-to platform for a company that is a bit earlier stage. Perhaps they're just getting started with TV. They want to test how it works, perhaps at a slightly smaller scale, and then potentially could also evolve into ITV AdVentures Invest.
Absolutely.
Have you had any such examples of companies that have gone through Ignite and then went through the investment through the IC of ITV AdVentures, or do they tend to be separate companies altogether?
At the moment, the portfolios are largely separate, although there are some interesting conversations going on with Ignite brands that are at that point of looking to scale. And as Sheena would have spoken about, media for equity is a really, really wise thing to look at when you're at that point of doing, perhaps a funding round at that time. So we are definitely seeing that happen a bit more. We've only been around for 4 years. So, to get brands to that point, we're kind of getting there now. So I think in the future, we're going to see a lot more Ignite brands moving across to Invest. But, at the same time, Invest isn't for everyone. It's a fantastic opportunity, and we're really, really seeing an appetite for that. Yeah. But a lot of brands that, would rather carry on working in the Ignite incubator, just say it is our commercial incubator. And, we have brands that started off with a regional test on ITV, matched funded by Ignite. And they're now 7-figure national advertisers still working in the Ignite incubator. So whilst it offers an entry point, you don't have to sort of graduate to one or the other. We just want you to stay with us, really. That's the...
Yeah, and absolutely. And you alluded to another preconception, and I think we'll discuss that in the next few slides about pricing and the fact that TV is expensive. And I appreciate, of course, the different inventories is, of course, carries some premium content. If we talk about Super Bowl, obviously that's highly premium. But the fact that you're offering that match possibility, the match funding, which, allows a startup to go a lot further. Is there some general minimum threshold that a startup perhaps should think of when starting with TV? Like how much, for example, could 50K could give you in a first campaign? Because there was a recent study, I believe, done by Thinkbox, if I'm not mistaken. It's a couple of years old, so perhaps I'm sure the pricing has changed slightly. But I was very surprised to see that a lot of brands, I think 35, if not 40% of advertisers in that given year actually spent on average about 50K on a TV campaign. So is there basically, where could be a place to start price-wise if you are doing TV for the first time?
Yeah, no, fair question. I think I know the study. I think it might have been the TV playbook for online brands. I think that might have been talking about the entry point there from a couple of years ago. So yeah, look, there's no one size fits all. It's always a wishy-washy answer, but I'm glad that you put a number on it because I can work with that. Different brands have different goals, different KPIs. We'll talk about those in a minute. The way that TV is priced, whilst we don't go into too much detail today, it's all supply and demand. So it's actually very, very transparent. It's all about the eyeballs that we have to offer, so the supply, and the advertising revenue that we have, which is, of course, the demand. So ITV is split into over 20 different transmission regions in the UK. So our little bragging right there is that we have more pieces to our puzzle than any other broadcaster. And of course, that's really, really important for startups when you're testing on TV, because you can get that benefit of mass simultaneous reach by going out and broadcast, but actually, working with a universe that, goes up to sort of 5,800, 6 million, something like that. Sorry, 5.8 million, 6 million. So you can take a smaller bite of the pie, and different regions, of course, with that pricing cocktail I mentioned, they have different prices. So for example, 50 grand going out in the north of England, this is on broadcast television, that's going to probably get you a really nicely weighted 8 to 10 week campaign running consistently, naturally across the day. In the south, you could also achieve that, excluding London. I think for London, it's the most expensive linear region.
Yeah.
You'd probably be looking at another route there. Perhaps you'd be looking at video on demand, where it's not supply and demand based, but actually a sort of flat cost per thousand by audience. So, there's different routes for different brands, but £50,000 would be a really, really good starting point. And actually, I would say it's probably quite a common figure for us to start off with for a regional test. Although we can work for less in many cases. If it is one of the more cost-efficient regions, something like Granada, which is the northwest of the country, we've executed fantastic campaigns for less than that. What I always like to say is, let us be honest with you. If you've got a figure in mind, rather than rule it out, let's have a chat and we can see if something's possible. If it isn't, we'll obviously be honest, because the worst thing we could do is push somebody onto television when it's not right. It doesn't cut through, it doesn't move the dial, and they don't come back. So we try to avoid that.
Great. And I think we will probably talk about the different level of support that you give to companies, because what you just explained right now, that media planning and the whole approach, I think it's quite, for a lot of companies that are doing TV for the first time, they're probably quite new to that. So yeah, we can cover that in the upcoming slides. So I will let you go through the next few slides.
Great. Okay. So, just I think as the sort of post that you put on LinkedIn said, we're going to talk about a few areas of getting onto TV. It's not going to be a concise, step-by-step planning process, but just I've picked out some headlines that really stand out to me as things that you should be considering when you are looking to go on TV. And as I've started here, as seen on TV, I mean, straight away, that is, a slogan that we've seen so often in the past, and it still sort of carries that real sort of badge of honor thing about it, so just a few things to be thinking about. So, when we're starting out on TV, that one of the first things that we want to know from a partner is what does success actually look like to you? And that might sound really daft. I want to sell products. Of course, I want my business to grow. But actually, they're very, very different approaches if we're going for sort of overall sales, if we're looking at pure cost per acquisition, which can be quite common in the startup community, and I completely understand why. Are we looking at brand fame? Are we looking 3 years down the line? And this sort of tree picture here, this is how I interpret this. This is someone used this as an example a few years ago, and I've sort of pinched it as my own because I really like it. Cost per acquisition is the fruit. So if you spend your whole time picking the fruit and enjoying the fruit and never bothering to nurture the tree is obviously your brand, eventually your tree is going to look like the one on the right there. So it's really, really important that whilst we always want to be getting customers through the door, we want to be getting them at the best cost per acquisition that we can. We want to balance that brand building as well, because I'm going to talk about brand a little bit later, because I'm really passionate about it. And it is something that startups need to be considering. Even if it's not right now, we need to start laying those foundations, because it will mean you get more fruit in the long run. So what does success look like? That's the first point I want to put forward there. What do you want viewers to do? So again, really, really basic stuff, but you'd be amazed how many adverts get made. And obviously we make adverts with our partners. We can help them with that. But many partners go to external agencies. That's absolutely fine. But of course, creative agencies work to different KPIs to us. So what do we want people to do? Because sometimes you get a lovely film, a lovely, something that you might see at Cannes, for example. But then when we're looking at the metrics, people haven't really reacted the way that we want them to. So be really, really clear about what you want people to do. It doesn't have to be a call to action of, pick up the phone now, go online now. But it could be something like making sure that your brand is present all the way through, and actually that your website is present all the way through. Just, especially as a new to TV brand, people know who you are and they know what to do. And another side of this is something we've experienced a few times. When you are on TV, you will raise category awareness as well. So actually, as daft as this sounds, when you're on TV, you want to capture everything that you're driving. What you don't want is your competitors benefiting from your television. So you're driving the category awareness, they're upping their bids on search, and suddenly they're channeling a lot of your traffic because the person can't remember your brand name, but they know that it was something in this category. So they go, thank you, I'll have that.
Yeah.
Let's get direct brand traffic. So be really clear about what we want people to do.
And I think that, sorry to interrupt, Callum, but that category awareness, if I'm not mistaken, I guess it's also sometimes regarded as that unprompted brand awareness, right? So when you go to someone and you ask them to think of a brand within the soap category, and then maybe Dove comes to mind straight immediately. Basically, that's that category awareness, right? Like you don't have to, it's just immediately seamlessly embedded in people's minds.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You want to be, raising category awareness is great, but you want to be the brand that they think of as well. You want to get that direct brand traffic, because later on we'll talk about return on investment, and we'll see how that can really benefit brands as well by getting that right.
Mm-hmm.
Having a clear message, but also a really consistent message. So I must credit the business of creativity for letting me pinch these slides. So Sir John Hegarty showed me these slides in a talk a couple of weeks ago, and I thought they illustrated what I wanted to say very, very well. So whilst these are big brands, it just goes to show that actually anyone can get it wrong. So let's make sure that we have a consistent message and that people can recognize what we're trying to say. So this talks about Nike versus Reebok. So we can see here what happens when Just Do It was brought in as a slogan, and we can see how they quickly took market share by being consistent. And obviously, things like Air Jordan came in and things like that, but they always had Just Do It on there. And Reebok suddenly start to plummet. And you can see here that towards the end of the graph there, Adidas actually acquired Reebok in 2005. That's when it stopped. Now, why did that happen? Well, Nike has a great product, of course. That's one major point there. But Reebok, 14 end lives in 20 years, they really couldn't make up their mind on what their brand was about. And Nike stayed consistent, people recognized it, and it was nice and easy to stick with the brand. So I think that's a really, really good example of brand consistency.
There's one other brand, since we're talking about brands, that I think is always regarded as probably one of the best just advertising campaigns in history. And I mentioned Dove as the soap company in my earlier example, but I think their Real Beauty campaign is probably one of the most long lasting. I don't know, it's been going on for like probably 25, 30 years. And it's that brand ideal, I think, as Ogilvy calls it, which is all about the ethos of the brand. I think they do it brilliantly as well. Yeah. It is basically exactly like you explained. It's that consistency that they manage to keep over time.
Yeah, definitely. And there's lots of it around. We've had the coronation recently, and a great one was the Guinness. Good things come to those who wait, and a Guinness glass with a sort of crown on the foam on the top there. Really, really clever way, bringing your brand consistency forward. So yeah, there's lots of it out there, but it's really important that we try to do that from the off. We know who we are. We know our brand identity.
Yeah.
Have a plan for measuring success. So, what does success look like? Let's identify that first. Let's think about the creative and how we'll get there. And, the media planning side, I don't really go into in this selection of slides, but obviously that's incredibly important as well. But how are we going to measure success? So this is my plug for the GeoX tool. So something that my colleagues in data and innovation actually launched this week. So what this is looking at is a partner's website traffic. So it's just a basic example of how we can plug in to Google Analytics, or we can give the coding to the partner so that their analysts can do it if they want. And what we can do is actually bring the regional test I spoke about earlier. We can create a control and exposed. Our guys can bring the lines together at the beginning there, so that we're sort of starting in the same place. And we can see there what happens when you bring out television. Now, actually, some campaigns separate far more than this one even has, but you can see there clearly what's happened with the television that's running and the website traffic, and also we can look at sales and things like that. We can plug into everything on Google Analytics there. So we have lots of different methods of measuring. We have a team that is completely dedicated to it. So that's a key pillar in AdVentures Ignite and Invest. It's something that we take across the whole portfolio. Yeah. So now debunking a few myths, right? So I think everyone has a view on television and what they think of it, whether it's a effective medium or not. Hopefully, this sort of quick tour might help to change people's minds. So look, TV is dead. That's what people like to say. I don't really hear it so much anymore, but I think that's maybe because people who know me probably get a bit scared to say that in front of me, because then I might go off on one. But TV reaches nearly everyone every week, so very much not dead. And you can see here, using Barb data from 2022. So this is a reach of 3 minutes or more across television. But we're still reaching nearly 95% of all individuals in the UK. Various audiences there can still be reached with television. Now, it's worth me pointing out that you can see there at the bottom in the source, it combines linear and VOD, video on demand viewing. So whilst video on demand, the way we watch TV is changing, it absolutely is. And obviously ITVX has come in now as the biggest broadcaster video on demand platform in the UK, both for content and for reach. We're up to 37.5 million registered users now. So, we have that outlet as well. But actually, that's nibbling away every year. But the lion's share of viewing in the UK is still broadcast linear. So it's just worth remembering that you don't often hear that. But for brands that are looking to cast that net wide, maybe a startup has reached that point of diminishing returns on digital, broadcast will get you out there better than anyone can, and it's very much alive.
Yep.
I think this is the one that you alluded to, Diana, at the beginning.
Yeah.
About wastage. So, another one we get, you get loads of wastage on TV. Why would you bother? No. And I always say, look, even if I didn't work in television, I would always have this point of view that I'm about to share with you. So you only pay for the audience that you buy. So this example here uses something that we covered last year, which was, fairly big event, the World Cup quarterfinal in 2022. So this was a men's razor brand, this example. I would normally buy men who are buying razors regularly. So perhaps they're in market, they use MasterCard data or whatever other third-party source to track people who are frequently purchasing. Now, with Barb data, and this is obviously a broadcast slide, this one. So everything else I talk about can be applied to video on demand or broadcast. This is obviously talking about broadcast primarily. So to go out in this game, obviously this was a live event. Everyone was tuning in to see this. The Barb audience, and I can talk about Barb if anyone's got any questions, another day or afterwards if there's time. You can't buy that audience. You have to buy a broader audience. So the one that we could look at is men. So you could look at all men. So the ad went out. You obviously captured 8.7 million, who are your core audience. They're people who buy razors regularly. But then you've got an additional sort of 3 million there that are men that don't buy them that often. So maybe people like me, I usually have a little beard, but I do purchase them occasionally. So you've paid for me. I'm worth having, I think, because I'll know your brand. Yeah. But the point of this is the additional. So everyone else watching the football there, you can see the additional grey circle there. Sort of 10 million additional people watching it. All the females in this instance. So they have not been included in the calculations. So it's not wastage because you are not paying for it. It's only wastage if you're paying for something, right? If not, it's bonus. It's bonus viewing. And actually, in this case, it's incredibly powerful because, they are people, the females in this equation that are going to be making these decisions, but actually not just about razors, but females in general. There's research to suggest that across a wide range of categories, females are key decision makers in households, be it finance, holiday, cars, a really, really core audience. And we actually saw in 2018, Jaguar Land Rover changed their buying audience, I remember, to be ABC One women, that Barb audience, recognizing that they're the valuable eyeballs there. They're the people I need to be speaking to if I want to convert. So in this case, they're all completely free. So it's a great example of the secondary benefits of broadcast television.
Yeah, this is a great example. We hear that a lot. And I think this is also partially because of the previous myth around lack of measurements, essentially, and the fact that you can't be very specific. But I think with latest technologies, and I'm sure you already start explaining that as well, I think you can probably even be as specific as targeting the first 2 letters of the postcode, I suppose, if you want to.
You can. I mean, we always have that. And look, many conversations are opened by people seeing ITVX and say, wow, that looks amazing. I want to be part of that. Planet V, which is our programmatic video platform, which is self-serve and can, agencies and clients can use it to build campaigns on ITVX, and in the future that will buy into linear television as well. So it's really good for driving conversation. But actually, when you drill into what we're trying to achieve, you realize that doing hyper targeting, and I always say, you can advertise to your neighbors if you want. We can go that granular, but what are we actually trying to achieve here? Yeah. We're trying to cast the net wide, and very often, if we use that sort of pricing calculation I said earlier, it's more cost effective to be using a slightly lower cost per 1,000 views and getting your core audience and getting a lot of bonus audience than it is to keep layering on targeting until you're paying 45, 50 pounds cost per 1,000. So there's lots of different ways of looking at it. Yeah. So this is just an example. So I have white labeled this for the purpose of this, but I've got some quotes coming up of actual brands. So this is a quick case study of a launch campaign that we did for a pet food brand. Now this pet food brand launched with us regionally. So we can see here, it was Meridian, which is the band of counties in the southeast around London. And we achieved a 40% coverage, a unique reach within that region across 8 weeks, and a frequency of 7 for the audience. So it was a really nicely weighted campaign. It worked to about £50,000, so the figure you gave earlier, a nice example. And we saw there, really good uplift in brand awareness. We saw category awareness, raise as well, and they managed to capture it. Brand search during on-air weeks, the averages were up there. We had website traffic, really big metrics across just eight weeks there. So brand intent was up. We used YouGov in association with the partner to track this. So results all the way down the funnel. So what I said earlier about the tree and the fruit, we all want conversion, of course we do. But if we don't feed the funnel at the top, obviously nothing's going to come out the bottom. So it's just always worth us, examining things properly and setting you up for success.
Yeah, and I think it's, we will never make the case of giving up digital channels to use TV. I think it's all about, and I think you have an amazing slide, which I don't want to spoil, but TV has still one of probably the greatest multiplier effect. And what is happening, although I think a lot of startups, digital native companies would expect to use TV as a direct response campaign, I think you can do that. But if that's the immediate goal, I think, and I've seen it, and a lot of companies probably are disappointed. But if you try to use it as a mix of both direct response and brand building, I suppose that's really where it works best. But what's interesting, I think, when we look into what's happening into the digital channels these days, direct response, I think, is not what the performance is not what used to be. We can talk about this at length, obviously, but AI changes everything. I haven't had the chance to test the new search lab from Google, but because I think it's only available in the States, but that changes completely, I think, how we think about search and the iOS changes and cookie deprecation, etc. So I think even with digital channels, if you just rely on digital channels, I think at one point, you mentioned, Callum, you reach those diminishing returns, and it could be quite late. And we've seen that, unfortunately, with, just recently was BuzzFeed News and a few others that folded. And in my opinion, I think it has to do with a lot that they focused on Facebook in the early days. But these platforms change and are changing constantly. So it's all about just staying on top of the trends, isn't it?
It is. It's about, and we've got, as you said, we'll move on to talk about this, but it's about knowing what channel does what and what you want it to do. I just wanted to pick up sort of tongue in cheek, but the word you use there is very commonly used around the industry, and that is performance. People call direct response, bottom of funnel stuff, that's my performance stuff. I really would like to know who created that expression, because they're a genius. Because ultimately, it's become the in thing that you think of your short-term metrics as your performance channels, and branding is maybe more of a nice to have. But of course, branding is performance as well. So I think it's a really, really clever way of putting it. But just on the topic of direct response, of course, whilst we talk a lot about brand here today, we can execute really effective direct response campaigns. They're just geared up in a different way. And in fact, we've launched some fantastic ones in the past weeks. So, if anyone's listening and that's, more what you're after right now, it's always worth a conversation, because there's just different avenues we have to go down, but we'd always love to do that.
Yep.
So this is just a little quote. I'm not going to go through it all, but basically you can see here that Ross Boyd, who's the founder of Dashly, who are a partner that we launched on television now about 18 months ago, saw some really, really good results. So this is quite interesting, because actually the main aim for Dashly was B2B. They wanted more brokers on the platform, but obviously more consumers as well would be a secondary benefit. So they saw over 80 new brokers join the platform, which is fantastic. They're a mortgage comparison site, or actually they're not a comparison. Ross would kill me for saying that. They're an always-on monitoring site who can help you switch if they find a better deal. They've got the secondary benefits there. Talks really nicely about the Ignite team, which is lovely to hear that they felt supported throughout. But actually the last line is the bit that really leads us in nicely. So actually noticed an uplift in digital marketing performance whilst we were on air, which was a real bonus. So exactly as you said there, Diana, Ross saw that with the campaign that his team ran with us.
And just before I go into the next section, the example you gave is also perfect because we just discussed about preconceptions or what we think it works, it doesn't with TV. I think a lot of companies that example you gave, it's more of a B2B2C company or a platform essentially, right? Because they have both clients, businesses, but also the end users. And it's very often believed that TV would only work for direct-to-consumer companies or just naturally companies that can reach mass audience. And it's not necessarily the case. Like you gave the example, and I think we also analyzed during our last report, I think we've gone through roughly 400 such deals. There were media for equity deals, but companies that use TV. And close to 30% of them are, in fact, SaaS businesses or they operate on a B2B model. And I think that's interesting to highlight as well, because you can do so much more now with TV. It's really about probably how you plan your campaign and what assets and inventory you have available.
It is. I mean, I will sort of be honest and caveat that whilst we can execute exactly like that, some B2B challenges are a nightmare. So, it's not always possible, but as long as we are honest with partners and we can, say whether something's likely to work, we can avoid any sort of disappointment there. But it is possible to execute good B2B campaigns. But as you said, B2C will always be, the real round that TV plays in there. Yeah. So the changing. Sorry, go on, Diane.
No. I was just about to say that you also have a wonderful example obviously it's in the ITV AdVentures portfolio companies, which is what 3 words, and that's also not a typical company that you could immediately think of to use TV because they have a very interesting model, and for them TV worked really well in order to get the consumer side of the business on board.
It did indeed. So they got the consumers to download the app, and then of course they worked really, really hard in the background to get the B2B with the sort of Lotus deals, Lamborghini deals, and getting it into all the cars and delivery services and actually monetizing it. So exactly, TV worked very well for them. So just touching on the sort of the changing face of advertising. So I know we were looking at sort of knowing which channels to concentrate on, but actually I've kind of reworded it because I think it's about knowing the role each channel plays. Every channel will play a role, as we said, and it's about knowing what role that is and how they're going to tie together. So first of all, TV, it delivers over the short and long term. So that's the first thing I wanted to sort of put forward here. So this is a ThinkBox study from a few years ago that looked at a collection of brands across different categories, as you see, the FMCG, finance, services, retail, and up to 2 to 3 months of well-planned TV, which is of course all we do at ITV AdVentures. Every pound that was invested, in a nutshell, there was a £1.7 cost benefit to that. Now, when I say cost benefit, I'm of course talking about money in the till being. Apologies if that chat window is.
We can't see it. It's probably just for you.
It's the noise of it. Apologies if it is. So cost benefit is the money in the till, but it's also the impact it's had on perhaps the aforementioned brand search. So are we getting more brand traffic? So we're not having to bid as much. And there's a little quote coming up which will talk more about that. So immediately there's a cost benefit there. But actually the longer term, you can see here up to 3 years on television. We know that TV does its best work over time. And the return on investment there is every pound in, £6.30 back. So you can see there that things get better and better as awareness grows and TV drives a bigger return over the longer term. So that's just a bit to kick us off there.
Yeah, and I've seen the same kind of trend, but also basically impacting your cost per acquisition on digital. A lot of companies that were using TV have seen that impact on the cost that they paid on a digital campaign, which basically decreased as a result of that.
Absolutely. So TV will be that multiplier. It's going to make those other channels work harder. This is what I mean about knowing what will do what. So actually TV is good to underpin plans. We don't really advise that you run TV on its own nowadays. As you said, it is a multiplier. So this study, again, another one pinched from ThinkBox, demand generation from 2019, this one. But, as you saw in the quote earlier, people see this every time they work with us. So this is actually a traffic light system, but our graphics team won't let me keep the traffic lights. So we have to have it in these colors. But the turquoise is, of course, the green. That's the impact that we want to talk about. Yeah. And this is what's happening when TV is overlaid with all of these other channels. This is how much harder they work. So they're staying stable in the mix. TV is overlaid. And social media, for example, 31%, uplift, radio 31%, print 31%. People see results. Things work harder. Facebook and Insta, and they become more acquisition channels. They work a little bit harder. So TV drives that mix forward. And it's a signal of success as well. So we started off by saying about as seen on TV, which just says a lot as it stands on its own. I always say to partners that I get excited seeing one of our partners, be it Ignite or Invest, go on screen. If I walk past my TV and that's one of ours, that I still get really excited. And across my career, I didn't stop for every Unilever ad that I saw to go, that's what it really says something about you. And I always say to partners, I bet you'll tell your family that you're going on TV, and I doubt you did when you were going on to social. That's true. That's true, actually.
And the people watching it, and I think it's something that a lot of founders have shared that actually impression in the past with me, that even your investors are watching you on TV, or potentially it could be of future investors or future clients that you get to work with, and that it just establishes or signals the success, as you said. I know we don't have the time to talk about creatives on this episode. I would love to maybe do a separate one on what really makes a good creative, because I think it's such an important fundamental aspect of the whole campaign. But just have a quick question especially for startups listening and that haven't done a TV campaign before. Do you work with startups? Do you provide that kind of creative support through ITV? Is that something that you provide, or they have to have a separate agency to work with, or have creative support outside of your partnership essentially?
No, so we can offer creative support to help people get onto TV, and we even have invest partners that require help with clearcasting, because obviously every ad that goes on TV has to be clearcast approved. So what we ask for Ignite partners is that to work with it in-house, they have existing assets that we can use. And when I say good existing assets, they don't have to be that we like the look of them. They have to be good resolution that we can actually work with. And there's a guy called Alan Hall, who I'll give a shout out to. He works in our Belfast creative team, and he's an absolute superstar. I'm always amazed at the quality of advert that he can come up with and how quickly he can work. So we've put some really nice sort of in-house ads onto television, but also help with the clear casting of people who want to use an external agency as well. But the idea is that we're offering support at every step. Right. So just to touch on this one, so TV is a signal of success, and this study is from 2020. Now we spoke there about what it says to investors, and something that is an immediate benefit for our partners is actually it really helps to get that retail space. If there's that retailer that you just can't get over the line, well, saying that you're going to be on TV in that region tends to help swing that. So that's just another sideline benefit there. But this was actually a panel of over 3,500 adults, and what ThinkBox did is they put the selection of different brands onto different media channels, and they gauged how they were perceived to perform in these categories, so quality, confidence, success, etc. And they could see that TV came out on top there, which is absolutely fantastic, that it was perceived to be the strongest and really bring that brand to life. But actually the brand that was on TV was fake. They put a fake brand in the mix, and despite that, it's still shone above the others. So it just goes to show there how you are perceived.
Interesting. So and I think there's a few research studies, if I'm not mistaken. There's one from TV Scientific as well, which is not just about, obviously it's about signaling success and the idea of an established brand, but TV ads also tend to be more memorable compared to a social media ad. And I think, if we probably think as a channel, you have both the audio and the visual aid as well, which makes a huge difference. But I think combined, both the success and signaling that established brand look and feel, and the fact that it's memorable, I think that's quite powerful.
Definitely. It's one of my kind of things I like to do, and I always have done, to be honest, since working in TV, is in a conversation just sort of stop, put people on the spot and say, what's your favorite ad? I never say TV ad, but they always come up with a TV ad. So they are the ones exactly that stick in your mind. So I just want to finish by talking a little bit about brand. We've sort of spoken about the longer term effects and how you got to feed that funnel. But look, what is brand? Because a lot of people think that it's a nice to have, and that performance, as we said earlier, that's what you want. Short term performance. Of course, you want some short term performance, but you want brand performance as well. You want long term performance. And I like to put it as brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room, and it is really, really important that as a growing brand, as a startup moving to a scale up, that people are saying the right things about you and that they're interacting even when you're not there to capture them. Yeah. So I think a great way to kick us off here. Now, this was something anecdotal that my colleague, Rebecca Hanley, told me. So she was working on Audi at a media agency a few years ago. I think it's a great example of that halo effect and why we need to get that halo effect that the brand gives. So when working on Audi, they found that, when they were advertising the R8 supercar, a really aspirational and really, premium brand image, that they sold not just R8s, but they sold A1s as well, because people were coming to the brand and they were engaging with the brand. But halo is a one-way street. You can't just concentrate on the bottom of the funnel and be trying to get people to buy A1s and expect to sell R8s as well. So I just really, really like that example that Rebecca gave. So I've put that in there to kick us off there. And also just a couple of quotes as well. So I think this is, so I forget who this was, I think it might be Warren Buffett that said this one, but this, very good for businesses, especially in the current economic climate as well. So, the single most important decision is pricing power. So if you can raise your prices without losing business, you've got a very good business. And obviously, if you have to really think about it and just hide under the bed when you raise that price, then you've not got a very good business. And I think in the current economic climate where, brands are capitalizing on, economic uncertainty, maybe a deflationary market in TV, gaining that share of voice, building that brand, and prices for food, etc., are, going up, it's very unlikely that they will come back down. So if you can build a brand that people are willing to pay for, your profit margin will, remain when this economic uncertainty goes. So I think that's a really, really nice quote. Yeah. But this is one of my absolute favorites. So it sort of brings together everything that we've spoken about. So Peter Field, well-known marketer and planner in the industry, and he just talks about reaching broadly. So if you are an online business, and really I think if you are a startup, you've got to be speaking to everybody in the category. You've got to reach them early and you've got to prime them, because otherwise it is just that bidding war that we spoke about earlier. It's going to get pretty expensive if people aren't coming directly to you. So the online world really is no place for weak brands. I think that's a fantastic quote.
Yeah.
So just to sort of finish us off, so I spoke a little bit earlier about our Ignite program, our Ignite incubator, if you like, and how it works. So it's designed to offer support at every stage. So we spoke about the media value. For your first campaign, we will pick up actually slightly more than half. And, I'd love to explain that to people if anyone's interested. So we try to break down that barrier there to help you test TV in the most cost-effective way. Creative production we spoke about there and how we can work with that. And it's typically between £1,000 and £5,000 per execution, usually nearer one, unless you're getting a really expensive voiceover. Strategic planning, so we absolutely love that. So my team does a lot of planning there. We also call in our experts, be it creative strategy or comms strategy or data and innovation. We have got so many skill sets that we can call on. I spoke about Rebecca earlier. She's fantastic strategist who we can call on as an example. And measurement as well. So we looked at a quick clip of a slide there, but there's way more that we're doing in that space. So these are the pillars that we work to for Ignite partners. And even though the matched funding can't be for every campaign, everything else is. That's the only thing that changes. And we don't jack the price up, so to speak. We want you to stay with us. But obviously, I'm sure everyone understands that we can't sort of go halves on every single campaign. But this is why partners have stuck with us. And we've now got an incubator that's got some really nice growing brands in there alongside our portfolio partners.
Are there any specific sectors, or is there like an ideal avatar of a company, of a startup that would qualify for ITV Ignite?
Yeah, so I mean, for the matched funding, you have to be new to TV, working with us directly. So every Ignite partner works with us directly. We don't work with media agencies. Obviously, we've got many colleagues that support and work with media agencies. So working directly, being new to TV. Also working exclusively with us. So for that campaign, and there's a short period afterwards that we would ask to remain exclusive as well. You don't have to advertise in that period, but if you did on TV, it would be with ITV. So there are a few criteria, but we've deliberately made it quite relaxed so that we're just making it more of an opportunity rather than something people have to jump through hoops for. So I think that's really helped to see it grow over the past 4 years.
Yeah.
And just to finish off, really, I can say everything I like about, the passion we have for what we do. But actually, when we get messages like this from partners, now look, these are taken from across Ignite and Invest, because as I said, my team works on all of it. But you can see there the sort of trends coming through about the support and what we could do to really make things a success for brands as well. So just wanted to leave that on screen for a few seconds, just to we do have that relationship with our partners.
Yeah, and I think we with Sheena, we talked about, this is interesting, when we had the show, it just came off the announcement that the investment in Resi, and 3 words, we just touched on that. And actually, one interesting point that Greg, who you have here on the quote, mentioned during a panel discussion we had earlier this year, which goes back to the creative support you mentioned, Callum, earlier. He said one of the things that they're doing at What 3 Words to kind of get a sense whether a creative works or performs well is actually they test it in a digital channel. I don't know if you recommend that, or if there are any other ways to test the creative if you are new to TV.
So what we do, actually something I should have put in there, is that we have a partnership with someone called System 1, who are all about ad effectiveness, and they can screen. I think they've got about 90 to 95% of all television ads on their channel that they can screen and give a rating to. So they have a vast panel that they can screen the ads to. They can see at every point of the ad how people are reacting in sort of different emotional categories. And then it all comes together to have what we call a star rating. So out of 5, and obviously we want to be edging towards 5. And also a spike rating. So a spike rating is that spike. Is it going to cut through? Are people likely to immediately interact with this advert? So we work with System 1 very, very frequently. We have done for Resi and various other partners. And that's something that for new Ignite brands, we run a pre-test as part of it, so that we can actually see how the creative is likely to sync. Yeah. And then we can take action off the back of it to make sure it's as good as it can be.
Yeah. And you also have Phil as a last example there as well. And earlier on the show, we talked about, who can actually see your ad on TV, and it could be your future investor or future client or partner. And I believe in a former conversation with Boris, he did mention that, I think it was off the back of the ITV campaign that he did, that he managed to get a partnership with Holland & Barrett across the UK. I think 150 plus stores.
That's right. Yeah, we launched the campaign to support it in April 22 when he got the listing. So yeah, it did really help with that, and that was obviously their first foray into retail as well. So yeah, it really goes. My favourite Boris story is actually about his surgeon telling him as he was going into theatre that he had seen them on TV, and that made Boris's day. So yeah, a big fan of them.
Yeah. Callum, this was super, super, super helpful. I think we are running short on time, but I do have one last question for you. And this is more, I think, to do with the fact that there's so much change happening in this industry. And I did ask this question on a formal panel last week at Wolf Summit. I had a couple of senior leaders as well from Warner Brother and Times Group and RTL. I want to get your opinion as well on, if you were to select one single biggest source or force of change that is driving, the media industry right now, what do you think is that biggest force that will change the advertising industry moving forward? What have you seen are the biggest trends, perhaps, that are impacting how we think about advertising altogether?
I think certainly for me over the last, I would say decade, but even 5 years, I would say that the measurement and accountability space and what brands expect from their advertising now is really changing the way we have to approach it and make sure that we're sort of connecting with things in the right way. So I think that would be the sort of biggest change there that I've seen. Also in our, and also I've spoken a little bit about how we're sort of approaching that. And this has all really come, of course, from the way that digital offers measurement and, the reports that people can get off of their digital. And of course, I always say tongue in cheek, they're marking their own homework because they're telling you how well it did, but that's the standard that's been set. So that's what every media now is expected to do. And for above the line media, that is a little bit harder, but we are really, getting there on that. Also, levels of targeting, I would say, the way that people buy the media, as I said earlier, there is that real drive for, even more targeting and all the different platforms. And I mentioned Planet V earlier, that's a massive growth space, and the expectation there from agencies and clients is that we have a platform that offers easy to use, quick targeting, but also scale as well. So certainly in the TV space, that's a massive shift. There's the shift from broadcast over to being a digital first business. So I've sort of waffled through 2 areas there, but they're the 2 major sort of parts in my life that are really changing very fast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, and these were obviously the points I heard on the panel as well. I think that about measurements is really, I think the lines between both digital and traditional media is getting a bit blurred in terms of measurements. And I think a lot of media companies and publishers and broadcasters are thinking of how to make that connection a lot smoother and have some kind of measurements that cut across all these different channels. So yeah, absolutely. I think I completely agree with that. And obviously I think AI, but everyone talks about that, so I would rather not open up that conversation, but it's an exciting, definitely space to be. Thank you so much for walking us through the slides. It is the first time we're doing this, but I love it because I learned a lot from you in this past hour. This was super, super helpful. It was a real pleasure having you on the show. And yeah, I think we have to do another one on the power of creatives and dive a bit deeper into what really makes a good creative and how to scale that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, thanks again for having me. It's been fun to chat.
Thanks, Callum.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the show. You can find the full video episode on YouTube on the Media for Growth channel, or you can listen to it on Spotify, Google, or Apple Podcast. And let us know what you think by leaving a review. The full script and more investment insights are available via our Media for Growth monthly newsletter. See you next time.